Well, thank you, everyone. With that, we come to an end of the panel discussion on the decade of security discipline, 2021 to 2030. We'd like to thank the moderator, Dr. Sriram, and all of our panelists, Professor Ryan, Dr. Deepak, and Professor Sugata Sanyal, for sharing with us their thoughts and insights on the subject. Now, for all of our audiences, we'd like to tell you that now we have two sessions which are parallel sessions. The first one will go on in the main auditorium, which is the one we are in presently. And the second one will be on stage one. So all you need to do is go on the top drop down menu and select stage one when you are entering the conference. So instead of the main auditorium, you choose stage one. And let me tell you that the session that we have in the main auditorium is on hardware, securities frontier, research, use cases, and ideas. Whereas on stage one, we have a session on crypto, realizing possibilities, strengthen the strength of modern crypto to realize digitization and innovation possibilities. And you can also refer to the program agenda by clicking on the schedule icon on top of the screens, as you may be able to see. The schedule will give you details of the program flow, and you may choose to be a part of the session that you want to. And like I said, now we'd like to continue with our next session, which is a session on hardware, securities frontier, research, use cases, and ideas in the main auditorium. And this session will be moderated by Professor Debdeep Mukhopadhyay, professor at IIT Kharagpur. And joining us as our panelists for this session are Dr. Shivam Bhasin, co PL and Thrust lead research for advanced hardware evaluation techniques for modern systems with security and privacy features at NTU Singapore. Professor Vijaypal Singh Rathore, assistant professor IIT. IIIT Jabalpur is also joining us on our program this afternoon to share with us his expertise. Professor Vijaypal Singh Rathore from IIIT Jabalpur, and Dr. S. Picek, assistant professor at Radboud University, the Netherlands, is also here amongst us this afternoon. So this is a session that will be moderated by Professor Debdeep Mukhopadhyay from IIT Kharagpur. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the session moderator to take the session forward. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for this kind introduction. So welcome to all of you on this interesting session on hardware security, trying to understand the various aspects of that. So briefly to start our session, I would like to mention that as most of you know, hardware security is a very promising field of research in the area of security. Whereas while classically people were more bothered about the software stack, the operating system security, and so forth, but people have understood gradually, and the industry also has understood that the hardware is a very important piece in the whole story of security. And there are different attacks that has that people have shown that can be thwarted by a suitable usage of the hardware. At the same time, hardware also brings in new promise in terms of performance, in terms of enabling various current day cryptographic solutions. It also brings in, for example, several interesting solutions in the cloud context of sharing the hardware with various entities, among various entities. It also brings in new challenges, and that essentially is something that we will also try to talk in our today's panel. So we have a very, I would say, like exciting panel which is entitled as "Hardware Securities Frontier," trying to understand the research use cases, and the ideas. And we have got an exciting list of panelists to discuss, as was briefly introduced. Experts who have been working in this area for a pretty long time. Shivam, Stephen, Vijaypal. So welcome to all of you. And we would start with a quick round of position statements from all of the panelists. So maybe we can start with an introductory note from Stephen. Would you like to start?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, should be now fine.
Yeah.
So, hi, thank you everyone. Yeah, my name is Stepan. I'm associate professor at Radboud University, and yeah, what I do is most of the intersection of cybersecurity or even cryptography and AI. So as such, my perspective on hardware security frontier will also be very much AI flavored. What I mostly do is things like side channel attacks and fault injection, where we try to use various types of artificial intelligence, so like machine learning, deep learning, evolutionary computation to make the attacks more efficient. But also, I'm very much interested in the whole security of AI, which is very much running on various low-level devices, chips, where also those devices actually have no security, because when people talk about AI designs and I don't know, running machine learning, deep learning on chips, they do not consider that those devices, those algorithms should be also secure against various types of attacks, which opens a huge domain for research, because we want to have security, but also that security, as in any other domain, comes with a price that it becomes slower, it becomes a more resource hungry, which for many applications is a difficult thing. In my opinion, the key applications for real life settings in hardware security is actually all those IoT devices, ubiquitous devices that we see often, that we encounter, that we somehow use the data. And while many people will intuitively say, yeah, but I don't care, do I have a security in this chip or that chip? I don't care, do I have security in my IoT fridge? But and which is true mostly of the time. But there is also the bigger perspective that, yeah, but still those devices are used everywhere. So while you do not care, same type of device is also used maybe in some more security-oriented application, or even going for a more serious setups like autonomous driving. There, the security immediately comes as a very important part, while the use cases are not so much different from those simpler devices. So the device itself, the hardware itself, is often very similar. And in my opinion, the frontier research problems in hardware security that we should focus is, yeah, again, from the hardware and AI perspective, is that we are still somewhere, I would say, AI assisted first generation research, where we use AI a lot because it helps, but it also because it helps us publish papers. So there are various reasons why to use AI. But realistically, we are not very close to having automated solutions. So we are just skipping from one problem to another. Before, maybe we ask question, I don't know how to break a target with side channel analysis. Now we say, well, I know how to break a target with deep learning and side channel analysis, but I don't know why the target is broken. So I think this is very important goal, to have also that explainability, because we need the full circle. Only by understanding what is happening can we actually, in the end, design more secure products, more secure hardware. So for me, I think that is the biggest challenge.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. Maybe I will request now Shivam to just give his position.
Thanks, Debdeep. So yeah, I actually quite agree with Stefan on all the points that he mentioned. And if I give my perspective on this problem, so hardware security is a very let's say newly known problem, maybe a couple of decades ago. But I would say this problem will exist for quite some time to come, because it is the marriage of algorithms and the hardware itself that is causing this issue. So whenever we run something on a hardware, it is bound to have some footprints, and that footprint eventually leads to the problem of what we call as a leakage in terms of hardware security, and which every adversary or attacker is trying to exploit in one way or the other. Now, since the problem is stemming from the basic physics, this is something which is really hard to get off. And we can see this in the example of an IoT device. So if we take an IoT device which from 10 years ago, which is, let's say, a simple 8-bit smart card, there, if you try to do any of these hardware security attacks, they have a piece of cake to do. Like something with a $100 equipment, you should be able to break those devices. But now, as we see that the problem is becoming known and people are acknowledging this problem, the research and the industry community are coming together, and they are actually trying to fight this problem by a collaborated learning, and what we can say as a security by design principle, where if you take a latest IoT device, you do get some baseline security. And that is, I think, basically is one of the direction is only when industry can work closely with the research community. I think the future generation of the product can actually come become more usable, more secure, and therefore this could be like one of the main direction for research on it.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen, thanks, Shivam, for this introduction. Vijaypal, would you like to also comment on this?
Yes, along with Dr. Shivam and Dr. Steven, I would like to just tell about the other problems. Like in hardware security, the major problem arises due to the outsourcing, as we outsource the different fabrication facilities or tool EDA tools from the third party. So during the development of integrated circuit, the different pupils or other tools are involved in designing the IC. So during the development, like several hardware security related attacks may be possible, like one adversary or an attacker, those who want to harm our IC, can introduce some malicious inclusion in the IC during the development stage. And that malicious inclusion can affect the IC during the application execution, and IC can be utilized for different purposes. Like in like recently, machine learning hardware or automated hardware, we are going for designing automated hardware for different applications. So in these hardware, if inclusion in malicious inclusion is there, then that malicious inclusion is very difficult to detect during the testing, as it will be inserted or it will be included by the attacker very smartly. So it is very difficult to detect these trojans or malicious inclusion during the testing. So that malicious inclusion activate or trigger and very rare conditions. So when it will trigger, it will we have undesirable behavior during the execution. So an attacker can insert for different purpose, that or attacker can utilize that malicious inclusion for different purpose. Like he can just activate the malicious inclusion for trigger some unwanted activity during the execution. Like in the in recently, like automated hardware we are going for designing, in these automated hardware, if there is a trojan, then it is most difficult, as like hardware I design, we are designing for deep learning models, machine learning models. So suppose we are design models or a machine learning model for face detection. Suppose that hardware or malicious inclusion is activated for a specific entity or a specific face, and then for that time, if we have detecting or classifying that face as a genuine face or a non-genuine face, then in that case, suppose for that input data, if hardware trojan is activated, and then in that case, that ungenuine or unauthorized face will be considered as an authorized face. So it will cause a very serious problem if we are using that hardware for sensitive applications like defense or surveillance systems. Like, so this is a very serious problem. So we can consider it as a one problem to detect a malicious inclusion, so that we can design a secure hardware. Another problem, like other piracy, overbuilding. If IC industries are designing electronic ICs, but they are afraid from pirating their ICs. So in order to prevent these the different methods we can utilize, but still there is a lot of challenge to prevent the piracy. So there another open problems in this area, that we can also go for these problems from my side. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Vijaypal. So I think we have got a fair round of comments. So if I summarize, I think we what we discussed was, like the promise of artificial intelligence in terms of improving on security, like particularly hardware security. We discussed about the fact that since we are understanding the physics better, our IoT solutions are getting more fortified by the usage of hardware security principles, which is a very promising aspect, because we know that IoT devices are going to be there around us, and like we need to kind of ensure that they don't open up like catastrophic attack surfaces. And along with it, we also had a discussion about piracy, or in general trust in hardware security devices. So I would like to kind of like just like maybe think aloud about the fact that while we are like we are basically looking at different technology solutions. Like for example, artificial intelligence is a, I would say, like is a technology solution which we are trying to kind of adopt for hardware security. So like this, there may be like other technological advancements that are also happening around us, like for instance maybe blockchains, right, which is also another area of research which is very popular, right? So what do you think, like are like other technological advancements which probably have a very strong cross cut with hardware security? So any comments on that?
Maybe I can start with a comment. That's actually a good point. I would like to give like the others point of view on this. So we can always see new technologies helping hardware security, but we can also see like how these new technologies are also vulnerable to the same problems. So for example, I like for the long time, hardware security has been associated, for example, with only targeting cryptographic applications. So where the target was always to find the key. But like if we look at the set of works which were done in the last 5-7 years, you could see that okay, that is not the case. You when you're running different applications on a given piece of hardware, like the same techniques can be adapted to different means. So there have been cases where 3D printers are vulnerable to the same sidechain attack which you would attack to on a cryptographic algorithm. As you were just mentioning about blockchain, now blockchain, if we see majority of the blockchain applications are still running in software, but there is also a market of cryptographic wallet which is especially designed to actually secure these blockchain transactions because of their high value of money, right? And but even those wallets, since they're running on the same principles, are also vulnerable in that sense. And same applies to running machine learning models on a given piece of hardware. So um, like although with this new technology we see new security perspective coming in, we see new technology coming in, but we are also against a moving target where the adversary is also adapting itself, is not playing with the same problem but also evolving and targeting something new and more meaningful that is out there in the market, for example.
Right. I mean, I think Shivam, you made a very good point that, I mean, when we are like in hardware security, like I think if I say, like Paul Kocha's work was one of the starting points in academic, like endeavors on hardware security. Then I think we have come quite a bit, and we have unearthed several attack surfaces, and we have also understood how do you counter them. We should not probably make the same mistakes in other evolving technologies like blockchains or something which where crypto is applied and also implemented, right? So I
Exactly.
think in the same context, right, I would also like to kind of ask, maybe Stephen would be the best person to comment on that, like because he has been working on AI and applications of AI on hardware security. So I think AI can also be a boon and a bane, right? I mean, essentially it can be both. So you mentioned about like AI, like being applied in the context of hardware security, but it's at the same time like AI is also like fragile, right? Because of several things like adversarial attacks and so on, actually. So what do you like to comment on this aspect, particularly with respect to hardware security of aspects?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a very difficult perspective. Also, even connecting to blockchain from before and everything, because there are multiple opinions, multiple perspectives we need to consider. One is academic perspective. From the academic perspective, we will not always do something that makes sense for industry, but is interesting for research. The same will happen with industry. Many times they will not do something that we consider to be a reasonable move because they are also seeing it from different perspective, from marketing, from selling perspectives. And this is the same what we see with AI. Indeed, it is great tool, but first problem is it's not a silver bullet. It will not solve all the problems. I mean, even now we are seeing, we are just transitioning from one problem to another problem. Before inside channel, the biggest problem was to select the points of interest to do a successful attack. Now we are saying with deep learning, we have easier job because we do not need to select points of interest, but we have much more work to do to find a good neural network to do the attack. So it's just let's say we are not completely in a circle going, but we are going in some convoluted way towards the goal, which would be completely automated security evaluation approaches, where we as the evaluators we should really do nothing. Here is the target. Everything from the algorithm, from the hyperparameters, from the points of interest should be automatically decided by the algorithm, some meta learning algorithm itself. And of course, I mean, from the other side, since AI was not developed to be secure or was not developed to include the countermeasures, at the moment when we start talking about security of AI, that is a huge domain because it's very difficult to expect something to be inherently resilient for things that was never meant to do. Adversarial examples, it's nothing special. It's just, I mean, yeah, we are showing a small number of samples, and then you do adversarial example from some different region of samples. Of course, neural network doesn't know what to do with that. I would be more surprised if neural network would know what to do with that. So it is in a very normal behavior. The bigger issue is how to patch all the things. We had cryptographic algorithms. Then we didn't know how to patch. Then we learned all the things, masking, hiding, side channel countermeasures, fault injection countermeasures. Now we are going again to step one. How do we protect machine learning against such attacks? Luckily, many things can be reused from crypto, but unfortunately, there is also a need to do a lot of specific things. So it is a long process, in my opinion, which for us as researchers is a good thing.
Yep. So I agree. I mean, I think this also brings us to what I think Shivam was also trying to mention, that like hardware security, like when you talk about AI accelerators, for example, right? I mean, uh, you know, like trying to kind of protect it, right, was essentially not the initial objective, right, of the AI designers or the AI implementers. But gradually, I guess people are also understanding that protecting the IP and also ensuring that the AI works as required is an important aspect, right? So this actually brings me to the what Vijay Pal you were commenting, right? I mean, how do you really trust the AI? Actually, I think this is $1 million question, right? I mean, how do you really, like you buy a commercial device which is essentially supposed to give you, like maybe work for an autonomous driving or something which is kind of critical. So, what are your thoughts? Like you think that we should try to go ahead, like in really ensuring the trust in the hardware piece which is supposed to be doing the AI.
So, thank you, sir. In this case, actually, AI it is very difficult due to their training. When we are designing an AI model, we need to train that model for a particular data set, and then we are utilizing based on the training. We are utilizing that model for the application, but it will not according to the analysis or previous history, we can see that AI model, if we are utilizing, then we cannot guarantee it that it will provide 100% accuracy for a data set. So if suppose a model is trained for a malicious data, even not if suppose we have not inserted any trojan or design is fabricated securely, but suppose model is trained, then still it will not guarantee that model is correctly classifying our data or correctly providing output or not, because no AI must or no machine learning model provide 100% accuracy. So we cannot guarantee it that is there any malicious inclusion inside the AI model or not. This is a one a problem. So in order to solve this problem, we need to focus on data set. It means we need to first check a data set that it is correct or not. If model is trained with malicious data, in that case model is also providing malicious output. So first thing is that we have to focus on data analysis. We have to apply some algorithm at the data analysis part, where we can check a data is correct or not. Second thing, in the fabrication part, we need to focus on the detection. If and then one end we can assume our model is trained with correct data, then there is, if there is a chances of insertion, then we need to focus on detection of malicious inclusion or trojan inside the IC. That we can focus by some checking or some other detection techniques, or we can focus, because normal detection technique that we have designed for other ICs, I think that are not possible for the AI based models, because these ICs are not deterministic. They can provide a non-determinism output, so that's why it is very difficult. So we have to focus on a special kind of methods that can focus to detect these malicious inclusion in the AI based devices. Yes.
Okay, so you bring a very good point actually. Like, I think what you're probably trying to say is that our verification methodologies, right, needs to be also
Yes.
adapted, so that they are, they are more tuned towards these new attack vectors, right, essentially,
Yes.
which we call okay. So I mean, this actually brings me to the fact that, like, I think verification, or in general, like all these aspects of hardware security also enhances the cost of our solutions, right? Well, when we talk about
Right.
IoT, right, we typically try to, at the end of the day, like, give some IoT products to the market which is essentially low cost, right? So
Cost, yeah.
what do you think, and this is a question that I asked to, like, maybe all of you actually, and, like, I would also like to think aloud with you, is that what should be our, like, approach as hardware security designers, right, to amortize the cost, so that the cost of our solutions are eventually less, with, like, at the end of the day, we all know that security comes with a price, so there will be a price, but how do you lessen that price, right? I think that is an important thing that we also probably need to ponder about.
From my perspective, I think we are included rather late in the stages. So we are many times, research is done on products or things that are published, that are produced, massively produced, and then we do evaluation and we say, well, this or that. Of course, always in things like that, you have a higher cost, because if you find some problem, you report it to the company, but the company already has the product with it.
Yep.
So the proper way to do it is either offer or have direct collaborations with companies to help them in the design stage, which can be also problematic, because then somehow you work for a company, or at least to do better job to offer freely available tools, frameworks that also people in companies can use to evaluate, at least on a let's say basic level, the security against latest attacks. Because people in companies commonly do not have time to check our latest research. Of course, it's even difficult for researchers to check all the latest research. So people in companies can do it much less. So we should also help them a bit, try to provide an easier way for them to use our tools, because it's also good for us in the end, because if they start using it, that also gives us the verification that what we did is not good only for academic purpose, but it's really useful, real world application.
Right.
I actually agree with Stephen on that, and yeah, like I think the way forward probably is to go by a security by design perspective, and we have two well-established examples of that we have seen in the past. So if I state, for example, post-quantum cryptography. So this has started at a time when problems of hardware security have been quite known, and the designers were have actually taken those consideration into their design, and now we know that compared to classical public key cryptography, post-quantum cryptography have some affinity towards hardware security problems or hardware security solutions. And this we didn't even see like from the start. We some algorithms were actually supporting hardware security affinity, but even during the design when this was reported, it was a very interactive and a proactive process where during from one round to another the algorithms were updated and actually came out to be stronger with every passing round. And like now some of the finalists, they are at some level they're pretty strong and pretty well studied, but there are still further investigation going on just to find the right candidate which can be an overall winner in this sense. Another example for this will be the secure hardware, or let's say the open source hardware with security, that is RISC-V. And although RISC-V came few years ago, but with open source and constant sharing of research and constantly updating, we now have some very strong, even some solutions that are that were winning competitions by DARPA and other such organizations, which have been now commercially available. So I think this paradigm is the best way to actually, if you want to save costs, because as an afterthought, it will always be very costly, because
Yep.
there is an aspect of viability when we are applying security afterthought solutions.
Yeah, I think both of you make very good point here. I mean, afterthought in security can be really, really costly. Like we have seen in, I would like to mention this, like in particular about this, when this finding was made on the Spectre and meltdown, right? And people knew that, I mean, it was very obvious that those things are around us, but security wise, right, this was a concern that was raised probably 20 years later, right? And we all know that the impact of such kind of attacks is quite humongous, right, when it comes to processor design or in general architecture. So and I also think, like that post quantum, right, essentially brings forth a great challenge in terms of, like updating our security solutions. In particular, this is also quite encouraging to see that, like automotives and other various kind of vendors, right, are actually opening up to post quantum solutions in spite of the cost, right? I mean, we all know that post quantum comes with a heavy impact in terms of performance, but still people are, like opening up to such security solutions, because I think gradually we are understanding that that security bites, right? I mean, if there are security lapses, then that is hard, that all of us have to pay for that. So so I think I would like to kind of like open this floor also to the audience in general at this point. I think we have around another 15 minutes. So if there are any like questions, then please let us know. Maybe the chat would be a place to kind of put your questions, or I don't know, like you may probably also ask us. And feel free to ask us actually if there are any specific questions that you would like us to address. Meanwhile, like I would like to kind of go ahead with our discussion, particularly like we had a thought initially about that IoT products are getting more secure, right? Essentially, they're getting more difficult to attack, probably, like few years before. In particular, this reminds me to the paper which talks about IoT goes nuclear, right? Where people showed that how some of these home automation lights can be subjected to power analysis, for example, or EM analysis, and recovered the secret key and then doing interesting attacks. But what do you think, like has really gone in between this period, right? Because we all know that the cost is a deterrent. We cannot really have heavyweight solutions in this context, but we probably have also seen several improvements in the hardware security literature, right, in terms of scientific achievements, right? For example, understanding better countermeasure designs and understanding, better protections against power analysis, fault analysis. Along with it, also, like developments in hardware intrinsic solutions like puffs, for example, right? So those things, do you think have helped us to fortify in general, the security architecture of IoT products? Any comments on that? Vijay, would you like to comment?
Ye-
Yeah.
Yes, for IoT based devices, like, nowadays, what is happening? People are designing complete model for IoT devices as a device where they can take a data from some field, like using sensors or some other, and then they are applying some or they are embedding some model that can take some decision based on the received data, and then they can some take action on that based on that data. So in that case, we require some small hardware as a lightweight solutions for that. So if we are using design based approaches, in that case, then it is increasing the size of the device or may increase the cost of the device, IoT device. So in that case, we can focus on the, I think, for the lightweight solutions, so where we can include lightweight security solutions that can lower the cost. If we are going for design based approaches, then we need to focus like small changes in the design, so that it will not affect cost greatly. Or second thing, we can focus on the after fabrication part, where we can verify the device with some software based approaches. Then it will be, I think, good for reducing the cost of the device or designing the lightweight solutions. So most of the cases, I thought to design some verification or detection based technique that can be utilized after the fabrication of the design or device. What I see, if we are embedding, then we can focus on some verification matter after the fabrication. But in the fabrication, it is very difficult, as we are not having internal access of the device. So it is very difficult, or it is a challenge for us to design an approach that can validate our IC, or that can validate for security, for that IC is secure or our devices or product is secure. So where I think we need to focus on post fabrication approaches that may, I think, lower the cost for
Yeah.
IoT based devices.
So I think you are like trying to emphasize on the debug, or like the post fabrication
Yeah.
test.
So
So
we are
actually,
actually yes.
so this
So actually,
actually,
traditional approach is not good or valid for recent um, devices or defense recent technology that we are going for that. So in that case, we need to focus on some different area, where different direction, so that we can validate it. Like recently, IoT device is complete device that can also having some model inside it. So in that case, we are normal method we are applying, then it is not good for detection. That normal methods are just for detecting the IC for
right.
normal input output operations that are not may not be applicable for it,
And
I think.
also, like, I think it is interesting point that you raise. Actually, I mean, we want debug, but at the same time, people have seen how to use the debug for attacks also, right? So like people have
Yeah,
done scan chain attacks and debug attacks,
yeah,
which probably
yeah.
also emphasizes, like DFT for security. Like we are also pressing, like
Yes,
stressing design for security, right? I mean, I
design
think
for security.
along
Yes.
with it, it is also important to emphasize on the like design for, I would say, testability for security. That is also important, right?
Yeah.
How do you test your security hardware, right? In general, I mean, Shivam, for example, you have been working on side channel attacks, right, for a long time. So, do you think that like that has really been transpired to our existing solutions around us, like in terms of security, in terms of hardware security, for example?
Right now, I think we are quite far, and
Hmm.
it's a long way to go.
Hmm.
But at least these are, let's say, coming into consideration. So, I mean, if I state an example, like now we are moving towards standardization of AI like security and privacy of AI, and these are, I mean, to my knowledge, are like parallel efforts which is going on by the US NIST, from the EU body, the general ISO body, as well as Asian bodies. So with these attacks and with these standardization, actually they are developing guidelines on how to deploy AI, and we can't actually box AI in that sense, because AI is, to my knowledge, one of the fastest catching technologies. So it has been adopted in every domain currently that I know of. You talk about healthcare, you talk about virus, you talk about defense, you talk about even general social media, everything, right? And some use cases definitely might not be sensitive, and we don't want to protect them. But then when you need to protect them, definitely the designers, they need guidelines, and that is the sole purpose of these standards that we are now developing. And basically it is to give guidelines, is like what to what are the basic sanity checks, or the basic good practices to be taken when we are looking at securing these algorithms in the future, on hardware, on software, or different. So like, yeah, these are different verticals which have to be individually handled.
Right, and I think it has also like influenced, like not only the embedded system industry, but also in general processor designs. Like for example, people are going for like different cache architectures, which can like help us to mitigate microarchitecture attacks, which I think also has been one of the key contributions from the hardware security community. So I think there are some interesting questions which are coming up. So I will quickly read few of them. So there's a question which talks about like for an AI powered security solution, are there extended challenges to its adoption? So I think this question maybe Stefan would be good person to respond to that.
Yeah. Um, we missed one first question, but that one I also don't know, so I will just go straight to this one. I don't. Uh, I think this is very so. The life of a trained model before industry decides to retrain a model, it is almost impossible to answer. I mean, it depends on the setup. The life of a trained model will, in my opinion, should be reasonably long, because we can always use it as some kind of baseline. Because one of the big issues is that we also don't know how to establish clear baselines in comparison. So longer term models, I think it's not a bad thing to have, as long as people are aware that it's state of the art can be already further away. And exactly know when, first of all, depends a lot on the industry. It depends a lot on the setup. So if you talk about, I don't know, hardware trojans, just as it seems to be, the changes we also see in research are much slower than the changes we see in side channel attacks. The same for fault injection. We do not see so much happening all the time as for side channels. So some domains are also very much explored in research. And there we also, I would say also, the ability to adapt to or to retrain a model is more crucial. But how long, I have no idea.
Yeah, and I think like the first question, right, which was on how to measure the near returns and cache misses rate to detect attack in memory and caches. So I think there are, like, as a suggestion, I can probably point to the performance counters or the monitoring units which are there, like for performance measurements. They are extreme, like there are good, I would say, like monitors for not only like from the architectural point of view, but also from the security evaluation point of view. So people can probably try to see, and there are many papers, research papers that have been developed. So finally, there is one question which talks about there are more dangerous exploits out there that are available to the public, raising questions on the data set used to train AI-powered solutions. So so I think the question says that if you are an organization providing AI-powered solutions to other industrial clients, then I think the question is how do you like answer the client's concerns? That's probably the main idea of the question. So any take on that?
Yeah, I think
So
this is quite an interesting question, actually. Like the market, or let's say the reach of these unknown bugs, or also zero-day bugs, or exploits is quite huge, actually. And it is not only used by the hackers, but also, like, it is to an extent also used by the law enforcement agencies. And altogether, they do raise a lot of concern. And I think, I would go back to the point which Professor Vijaypal made earlier, that I think verification, or trust on basically post running of your model is probably like something which can definitely help, where you can give proofs and an assurance of your model has passed a certain list of sanity checks, which are, let's say, recommended by a set of experts, or a set of certification bodies. And that can probably be a way to assure your clients that what you're doing is actually like the best practice in that sense. Professor Vijaypal, if you'd like to add something.
Yeah, on the data set part, just actually in the security problems that I already told that data set is a very critical things in the AI based models. As if data set having some in unwanted data, or some intentionally malicious included data, so that data set can train a model some for some unwanted operations. So that unwanted operation, or that operation can change the behavior of the model, or that can uh, predict the that can provide false prediction during the execution. So it is very important to validate the model data set before training a model. Currently, nowadays, what is happening? People are using pre-trained model. As if you are designing a hardware based on the pre-trained model, that is a very very serious concern, as we cannot trust on that pre-trained model, and how these models are trained, or on which data set these models are trained. If we are designing directly hardware for these models, then we cannot assure that models are correctly designed. So it is a big challenge to verify the data, or to design a model for AI based solutions.
So I think we are running out of time. So just to quickly wrap up, I think we are very interesting discussion on like the opportunities and challenges at the frontier ends of hardware security. And I would like to say that the challenges are nice because that keeps us active, right? So it's good that and also like we can see that there is a definite impact of hardware security on improving the overall security for several emerging technology. So I would like to end with that note and say my warm thank you to all the panelists for their comments, and also to the audience for like being along with us and asking nice questions. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.